Basement, level vibes with another one, straight up, blackness aye. Who tell the truth? Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benskop, straight up from the root. Mark Benskop, who tell the truth? Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benskop, straight up from the root. Mark Benskop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money. Straight up, him attack, educating everybody. Big up my friends and big up my family. Turn on the radio, catch the vibes, it's integrity. Straight up, Benskop stands for unity. One people, one nation, one destiny. Free up the truth in the air, even the blind can see. The deaf can hear, the dumb can talk, the cripple can walk. Boom. Who tell the truth? Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benskop, straight up from the root. Mark Benskop, who tell the truth? Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benskop, straight up from the root. Mark Benskop, we have to gather wrong, grab a seat and sit down, pay attention, education, liberation, we have to stand strong. Benskop upon the radio, lively up the program. Everybody call somebody and let them turn and tune and on the radio and catch the boom song. We boom it up already, we have to boom it up again. Expose and reveal him. Who tell the truth? Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benskop, straight up from the root. Mark Benskop, who tell the truth? Mark Benskop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benskop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benskop, straight up from the root. Mark Benskop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money. Straight up, him attack, educating everybody. Big up my friends.
Yeah, my name is Jasnity Kaldata Francis Vietnam, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my ex next to the cup, and what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data. I have none.
Yeah, this is the elite team.
Mr. Mark, I believe every word of what Mr. Shu is saying. I am also afraid of what Mr. Shu. Mr. Shu, if you are listening, I don't want anybody to harm you. This is a serious thing. Corruption is big. And we Chinese have to stop that. Been bullied by Jack Dale and other government officials to pay bribe.
Guyana really nice. Guyana. It's a nice place.
Hello, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
And you're confident that you're going to deliver credible and fair elections?
Of course.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Here we go again. Welcome to Straight Up Tonight. I'm your co-host. My name is Wayne Caesar, and working beside me would be your host, Mr. Mark Benchop. Good evening, Mark. Welcome to Straight Up.
Yes, good evening, Wayne. We want to let the people know that Lemon is back on the job. We do have Lemon back on the job. Wayne, I noticed that you were looking at this stuff here as we prepare to begin the show. I saw your, as we say on the quarantine, watalele. I don't know what you guys say in Plaisance, but on the quarantine we say watalele. How many of our listeners know about watalele? Well, if you don't know about watalele and you go down to this place here, guess what? It's Linda's restaurant, right in Brooklyn. You'll know what watalele is when you see these delicious foods right there at Linda's restaurant. We want to welcome Linda's restaurant on board with us, guys. This is what we're doing now. We are advertising stuff. We're not just coming and talk. We're introducing these businesses to the platform so that you guys can go out and support all of the businesses, whether it's Shalon law firm, Miss Washington's law firm, whatever it is. We have Clive Fraser and his barbershop. We urge all of you guys to go out and support the business. And just in case you guys, especially you guys from the quarantine, just before you go to bed, right after the show, please put some rice grain at the front of your doors. Put some rice grains at the front of your doors. I'm not sure if many of you caught on to what I'm just saying there, but put some rice grains at the front of your doors. Wayne, what's going on? How was your day, man?
Yeah, I'm good, Mark. The day was going pretty good. I mean, just now I got a bit hungry there looking at the black pudding, the white pudding, and everything that you just had up there. I do frequent Linda's restaurant quite a bit, and there's some pretty good food there, man. You can get everything there, from Korean roti and dal puri and mitai, everything, sponge cake, everything you could think of, man.
Let me ask you this, Wayne, and we want to say good evening to all of our listeners. We don't want to scare anybody away, but do share the link. Let your friends know that we're on. When I did mention earlier that after the program, folks may be more inclined to put some rice grain, a bunch of rice grain by the doorsteps. You know what that is for, right? You do know, Wayne. You do
Mark,
know what that is.
People typically put rice grains. Yes, I do. I can explain if you want me to.
Sure, explain it for us.
Do you?
Yeah, go right ahead. We put rice grains.
Okay, well, I remember back. Yeah, well, Mark, people typically put, and it's not just a few rice grains, it's quite a bit to make the whole count. All right? Am I correct?
Absolutely. So usually when the whole when they count and they're distracted, they got to go over and over again, and then we catch them. Now, thank you, Afraz, and all of you. You guys caught on. You know what's happening. We got to be able to count the votes. And the votes are not like rice grains, mind you. You got to stop and recount and forget and so forth and so on. When are we going to get this thing right at GCOM? When, Mr. Caesar? When?
Mark, listen, that's an interesting question there. And to me, that's the bonus question, because that list needs to be right come 2025 or even before 2025. And Mark, what really upsets me even more is that government that is sitting right there now, it's not a legal government, man. Order 60 cannot sit a government. There is no way that Order 60 can sit a government. This government is not legal. And I would say this to all the investors investing in Guyana under this government. You will not receive your gain on investment from the people of Guyana. You have been warned. Please curtail your investments. Curtail your investments. We will not pay you back.
Well, one of the things definitely, the country is open up for investments, but under, and I agree with you, a legitimate regime. This regime is not legitimate at all. And oftentimes I wonder, how do these people like Claudette Singh and all these other individuals who suddenly got a little money and they feel they're a little rich, they could talk up to people, talk down to people. We know who some of those culprits are. But how can these people like Claudette Singh, what do you think might be going through Claudette's mind right now? Because people are protesting, people are upset. Majority of Guyanese are upset with Claudette Singh. Some of them were there in front of GCOM protesting, and kudos to those individuals. But how do you think she sleeps at night, man? Apart from counting rice grains.
Well, first of all, Mark, she's got to be very, very concerned, very worried, and somewhat stressed out, unless cockroach would have come overnight and eat out her conscience. Now, this whole thing with Order 60, Mark, it's an error on 3 different levels. Starting at the GCOM level with, of course, Miss Claudette Singh, who's on screen right now. Then we move up to the Chief Justice. She also erred big time. As a Chief Justice, man, you should know the laws, man. How can you allow Order 60 to sit a government in Guyana? That's Rox and George need to revisit that, man. And then, Mark, to the level of the CCJ, what they should have done is to have the duly elected sitting government continue to sit there and call snap elections, because deem the elections inconclusive, and let's do it all over again. But
money talks, and the election was what it was. Wayne, money talks, and just stick a pin there. This came to mind. This was exactly what happened in Guyana, and people were threatened. Mercenaries were in Guyana, probably still in Guyana. We know of the Russians who were at the Pegasus and the Marriott. I don't know. Ramjatan just allowed them to be escorted to the airport, and they were expelled out of Guyana. And so I read this headline the other day: exiled Russian mercenary boss Prigozhin hails Niger coup, touts services. In other words, he is saying that they provided services and so forth. And Guyana came to mind during the course of the 2020 elections, that there were mercenaries in Guyana, there were riggers in Guyana, and a lot of things played out. Lots of things played out that maybe some people do not want to talk. A lot of unscrupulous things played out, gangster things played out. Go ahead, Mr. Caesar.
Mark, and you're correct. All this gangster stuff that would have played out in Guyana. Listen, the only thing that could stop what's playing out in Guyana is its citizens coming out in large numbers. Listen, Mark, I am not the type of, I'm not promoting any violence here or anything, but I'm going to say this, Mark. The citizens of Guyana needs to come out and shut the country down in a very, very nice way. Listen, you don't have to be rough, you don't have to be rugged. You just come out into the streets, you park your cars, you park your minibuses, and you just stop the flow of everything. You know why? Because you stand to gain nothing from what is flowing through your country, which is large, large sums of money on a daily basis. You know, Mark, I was thinking today that, we are extracting oil in Guyana and all these things are happening, and we're talking about the fastest growing GDP and all these. What has ever happened to an increase in the Guyana dollar value? It remains the same, Mark. So these people are these economists, they're talking a bundle of garbage. Okay, they all need to go and check themselves. They're talking a bundle of garbage. Okay, you're talking about all these great things happening in Guyana, nothing is happening for the people. The value on our dollar have not increased. We're in the same position where we started. It's just that, these high level cronies and their family members and friends and favorites, it's just getting all the money. That's where the money is going. So how can you say the GDP in a country is growing? How can you say the people are the richest per capita? You got to choose out those people. You have to be specific, because this money is not hitting all the Guyanese people the way it should, Mark. And people like Claudette Singh, listen, she's a despicable person, man. She's a despicable person. You know why, Mark? Even if somebody's threatening you and you can't execute your duties because you feel threatened, then walk away and give the job to someone else who can execute and meet the mandate of the Guyanese people. GCOM has to meet the mandate of the Guyanese people, Mark. It is an independent organ and it needs to act independent, starting with Miss Claudette Singh. She needs to be unbiased, independent in fact and appearance. She needs to move away from the position where she is always voting with the PPPC commissioners. She might as well go ahead and say that, hey, I'm a part of the PPPC and that's it. It's better she come and be transparent. I would accept that, rather than her hiding behind closed doors and impoverishing the Guyanese people, because that is essentially what her decisions, her wicked and unlawful decisions, that's what it leads to. Further impoverishment of the Guyanese people. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wayne Caesar. It's 19 minutes after 9 o'clock. If you're now joining us, this is Straight Up on 107.1 FM. Our operator, Lemon, is saying that we should be joined in just maybe a couple of minutes or so by the Chief Whip. The Chief Whip, Member of Parliament, Christopher Jones, is going to be with us this evening. We want to find out what's happening with regards to Parliament. I know the Chief Whip, they go to Parliament tomorrow. Thank you so much, Lemon. Lemon has now the Chief Whip. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, Mark. Good evening, Wayne.
Good evening, Chris. How are you?
Not bad at all.
All right, Honorable Christopher Jones, Member of Parliament, let's get straight to the question. People oftentimes, they think of whips, especially me. When I think of whips, it reminds me of, oh gosh, those small days out there on the quarantine. The whip started for me at nursery school, and it still goes on a day like today. I'll have to be honest with you. Close the door, please. Honorable Chief Whip, though, Chief Whip, explain your position. I think Wayne and I were discussing that earlier, and we find it appropriate. Go right ahead. Start with that.
All right. So again, good evening to your viewers, Mark. Well, essentially, the role and responsibility of the Chief Whip in the Parliament is to ensure that the members of Parliament representing whichever side, that one, they are all present at a particular day of the sitting. That two, the particular MP who is either a shadow minister or has a particular responsibility is at the Parliament. And depending on what bills, motion, or pieces of legislations that are going to be presented in the House, that particular individual is prepared to either debate or make a presentation as it relates to that. Separate and apart, the chief whip also has the responsibility to ensure that the members of parliament who shadows a particular minister also brings bills or motion or pieces of legislation to the National Assembly, which presents the opposition side as it relates to a particular bill, motion, or piece of legislation, or an amendment to existing laws that currently exist that are on the books. In a nutshell, of course, there are parts in time when they are a division that is called in the National Assembly, in which individuals will have to vote. The role as well, again, is ensure that all your members of parliament are present, so those votes are counted as well, part of the responsibility. The chief whips for both sides, the government and the opposition, will meet. Like, for example, tomorrow's sitting of the National Assembly, we will have to look at the list of speakers. I have my list of speakers, the government side has their list of speakers, and we compile as to who will go first, second, and so forth for all of the pieces of legislation that are going to be on the order paper for tomorrow. So in a nutshell, that is part of the responsibility of the chief whip. Save it up step outside of actually meeting with the government's chief whip on a particular day of the parliament. There are also those sidebar meetings that will happen, or those phone calls that will happen a few days prior to a particular sitting, particularly if the opposition side would want a particular piece of legislation go to the special select committee. That sort of sidebar meeting could occur with the government's chief whip before the particular sitting on a particular day.
All right, Chief Whip. Well, there you go, Wayne. You got it. We discussed that earlier.
Yes, that was well articulated and explained. Thank you, Chris. And by the way, Chris, I love that jacket, man. Very sharp. Very sharp.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Wayne. It's all over to you, because I can ask a follow-up question after yours. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I have a question that I wanted to ask Chris for some time now. Seeing that you guys have been in Parliament for the last 3 years, Chris, I want you to, in a nice nutshell, very nicely, tell me a little bit about the Speaker of the National Assembly, because what I would have seen the opposition would have tabled and brought to the table a lot of issues, especially when they were fresh, because sometimes, listen, we might be meeting like you guys are meeting tomorrow, Chris, and something may occur Monday or Tuesday. I mean, they should be special. They should be, there should be special instances where if something would have occurred that is impactful and is impacting the country, the opposition should be able to table that on short notice, because it is so impactful and it's affecting our people. And every time the opposition would table such a motion, the Speaker of the House will always reject it and find an excuse. And that really bothers me, Chris. Please, go ahead.
You are absolutely correct. In the Parliament, it allows for matters of urgent public importance, and that could be brought by any member of the National Assembly. We have had instances in which you had former opposition leader Joseph Harmon. During his period, you had massive flooding throughout several of the agriculture regions, in which it devastated a lot of agricultural lands and so forth. And the opposition leader at that time had brought a question which should be considered urgent and of public importance. And surprisingly enough, or rather maybe not surprisingly enough, the Speaker of the Assembly dubbed it not urgent, not of public importance, which, based on what I just pointed out to you, the question set right there as it relates to urgent and of public importance. I said to people many times before is that what I consider the current Speaker of the National Assembly to be is what I call gatekeeper, or one of the People's Progressive Party Civic's gatekeeper. And his role and responsibility is to essentially ensure that no questions, no motions that are brought by the opposition that will have a significant impact on the society and, of course, impact the PPP negatively, he ensures that those never make it onto the table. For example, Member of Parliament Annette Ferguson a few months ago brought a motion to discuss the cost of living, the serious cost of living that is plaguing every Guyanese, irrespective of their ethnicity, irrespective of the political persuasion. After 3 months of that piece of legislation being tabled by Annette Ferguson, we were given all assurances that it would be on the order paper. 24 hours before the sitting of that particular National Assembly, it was brought to Annette's attention that part of her question or this content of our motion was not in keeping with Parliament, and as such, she had to amend it. That meant that the following day, when it should have been tabled in the Assembly, it was not. Annette Ferguson made those amendments based on the guidance of the clerk of the National Assembly and the Speaker, and tabled it back. It came back to the table 2 months after. Lo and behold, on the said day of the Assembly, when the motion would have been debated again, Annette Ferguson was then told that the content in her motion clashed with the standing orders of the Parliament, and as such, she could not deal with it. Annette Ferguson further amended that motion. The government, having their government business, they allowed their business to stretch way into the morning hours. Annette Ferguson's motion came up for debate around 2 a.m. the morning, and it went all the way to 4 p.m. At the end of the debate, the government voted essentially saying that there is no urgent matter of cost of living that is affecting the Guyanese people, in which when you listen to the populace across the country, they beg to differ. That is just an example. But as I said before, the role of the Speaker of the National Assembly, like many other constitutional holders in Guyana, they're essentially gatekeepers of the People's Progressive Party Civic to ensure that certain things don't fly. Save and except, well, not save and except, for example, the DPP. I know Mark Benchcap is on record many times making reference to the manner in which the DPP administer her responsibility. But the DPP is one in which I too will label as a gatekeeper for the People's Progressive Party Civic.
Well said. Good question there, Wayne. If I can feel a question from the audience, Karen Ann is asking here, if you are feeding question, blah, blah, blah. Could you please ask the Chief Whip what guarantees they have that the Hansard records event and notes, etc., every time, and how it's secured for future reference, taking into account the sort of regime we're dealing with? Good question, Karen.
Yeah, indeed. After a sitting of the National Assembly, all members of Parliament are given the minutes of the proceedings of that particular sitting. So the content that was discussed there is there. As well, you are free to peruse the Hansards, in which I do, after a particular period of time, peruse those Hansard along with some of the members of Parliament who would have had particular pieces of legislation on that particular day, to ensure that the content of the minutes is accurate based on what transpired on the day. As well, if there are areas in which we are not too clear as to whether or not the content has been captured accurately, we go back to the National Assembly video recording, in which you can view the actual recording and look at the transcript to ensure that they coincide with each other. Ever so often, we would reflect back on those video recordings to ensure that they're still there. But separate and apart, the actual Hansard, the physical document in a booklet form, that is made available to all the members of Parliament. So in my archives, I would have the Hansards of a particular month or a particular quarter. I should even say month, because the National Assembly don't meet monthly. So for a particular quarter, I will have that physical Hansard in my archives for future reference.
Thank you so much, and good question there, Karen Ann. Appreciate that. Let me ask my question before we head back to Mr. Caesar. Well, not really my question, but Colin Barnwell is saying, hey, boycott the sham parliament and take your parliament to the streets. I know that you guys saw that, and I love this sort of action, though. But parliament is indeed a sham. You have a Speaker of the National Assembly who doesn't give a rat's you know what. Respond to what Colin Barnwell is suggesting here. It's a sham. Why are you guys there? Because you go there tomorrow, and guess what? Tomorrow they're going to be asking for a couple $2 billion more so that they can go and share out to their friends and cronies. Why still go into Parliament, sir?
Right. So we've been asked that question many times. Why go? Because essentially, the government will have their way. I take you back to the period of former Speaker of the National Assembly, Ralph Ramkaran. And this would have been either the 9th or the 8th Parliament. I recall sitting in the chambers and listening to the PPP shout to the then opposition members of Parliament, which included people like Stanley Ming, the late Derek Bernard, and so forth, just to name a few. And they will shout to them and say to them that, listen, you will have your say, but we will have our way. And it has been that trend throughout throughout successive People's Progressive Party civic administration in the National Assembly. At the end of the day, the Parliament is the place in which laws are made, amended, bills and motions are brought to the House. And of course, it is captured in the Hansard for future reference. It is the place in which we, who are elected representative, have to go to represent the people's interests. So it is not a case that we could just decide that, listen, we're not going to the National Assembly because it doesn't make sense. At the end, that will be an individual decision or a collective decision amongst the opposition members. But at the end of the day, there are some 200,000 plus people who elected us to go there and represent their interests. The People's Progressive Party Civic has been successful over the years with their propaganda. Is that if, for example, tomorrow there are empty seats in the National Assembly, you will hear the propaganda machine go in and spin. And even, unfortunately, some of our supporters will fall prey to the PPP's propaganda. That, look here, you have elected representative, people who are paid a monthly stipend, people who should be here to represent your interests, people who should be here to argue the opposite as it relates to this bill or that piece of legislation and so forth, and they are absent. And at the end of the day, they will receive their stipend at the end of the month. And that is what the propaganda machine will go out there and spew. And as I mentioned before, unfortunately, some of our supporters will fall into that same trap and say that we are wasting time. So what we do essentially is twofold. One, we go to the National Assembly and we argue vigorously and put forward our position as it relates to particular motions or bill. And then on the ground or out in the streets, we hold ever so often what is called the People's Parliament. The last one we held was, I think, very early last year at the Starbrook Market Square, in which the very same pieces of bills or motions that the Speaker would have denied entry into the Parliament, we brought that out to the floor, and we have our MPs who debate right there in the public square, and we have been doing that. It is a procedure or a mechanism that we continue to use and intend to use in the future going forward. But as it relates to the boycott of the National Assembly, again, as I mentioned, we are there as a result of people who voted and elected us to go there to represent their interests. And that is what we have to do.
Thank you, Honorable MP. Mr. Caesar?
Yeah, sure, Mark. And Chris did say something there that caught me there. Propaganda machine. Indeed, that's what the PPP is. And you know something, Mark? I have to call out this person, because I recall, Mark, when the opposition would have tabled a motion to speak on the Vice News findings. I recall that. And the Speaker of the House would have rejected that. And we would have seen in subsequent videos that was released by Vice News, Barra Jagdeo sitting in his home, making deals with Sue and, corruption right in front of our face. But yet, our opposition was denied an opportunity to table a motion to discuss that. Listen, Mansour Nadir, I think it's his name, Mansour Nadir is the worst Speaker of the House we've ever had in Guyana. He's despicable. He's horrible. He's not independent, not one bit, because he would not give the opposition the smallest of breaks. And I agree with Chris. He is a gatekeeper. He will block any and everything. And the PPPC government should be ashamed of themselves. This is definitely not the government for the Guyanese people. Absolutely not the government for the Guyanese people. And, Mark, I cannot wait for change. I am excited to see what change looks like.
We all cannot wait for change indeed. Good evening to all of you. If you're now joining us, Honorable Chief Whip Christopher Jones is with us this evening. You guys are heading back to Parliament tomorrow, obviously to sit there and watch the PPP give themselves billions more. How do you feel about going back? Because they're not going to hear anything from you guys. They don't want to hear about the Madjo situation. They don't want to hear about anything. How do you feel going back there to Parliament to listen and to watch them vote for billions of dollars more that will go down the drain and in their pockets and their friends' pockets?
But, Mark, in every society, well, particularly Guyana, when there comes a time for general or regional elections, there's always this hue and cry and big pronouncement by the PPP about democracy. It appears for the People's Progressive Party Civic, democracy starts and ends at the general and regional elections. But democracy in terms of the people's representative and having an opportunity to represent people in institutions such as the National Assembly, that is where democracy ends. It is very unfortunate, and that's why we keep saying to supporters on both sides of the House that essentially the opposition has a role and function in any democratic society. And clearly, by virtue of what we pointed out earlier, in terms of pieces of legislation not being allowed to make it onto the order papers, questions not being allowed to ask by the opposition members. Clearly, democracy in Guyana, I wouldn't say is being eroded, but rather has been eroded. Many of the pieces of legislation that the PPP has tabled and passed, or even legislation that they have amended, have essentially removed those guardrails of democracy. And this is the point that we have been making not only nationally, but throughout the Caribbean and internationally. We've been bringing these matters to their attention. And that is why we say that going to the Parliament is important, because you have the international players, the ABCE countries, and they are watching on. Whether the PPP believes it or not, they are watching on based on our own engagement with them. So when you go to the National Assembly and, for example, you table questions and those questions are not being allowed, it is noted by the international community. Because as I mentioned before, if Guyana is truly a democratic society, then an opposition movement in Parliament has every right and that responsibility to ask questions, to table motions, to seek amendments, and so forth. By virtue of the fact that it's not happening in the National Assembly of Guyana is a clear indication that democracy is under threat. Those guardrails that are there to ensure that the country and the government operates in some sort of democratic manner is no longer there. Our presence in the National Assembly helps to amplify that point. Because case in point, Wayne was able to allude to pieces of legislation that was brought by the opposition some time ago, and the Speaker of the National Assembly disallowed it. So Wayne could have only noted that by virtue of our presence in the House, and he was paying attention. And similarly, as I said, if you allow the PPP to go to the National Assembly in which the opposition benches are empty, you give them free rein, and therefore you have no argument. But we're going to make ourselves present. we're gonna put forward our arguments. All and sundry has an opportunity to listen. It is broadcast live. It is captured by the Hansard, and at the end of the day, it speaks to a erosion of democracy in a country with a government that love to profess to the world that they are a democratic government of the day.
Well said, Chris. And based on what Chris would have just said, and I totally agree with him, we need the opposition to be in parliament. And I agree also with my good friend, Mr. Colin Barnwell. We need to take the protest to the street. So what we can have, essentially, we can do both simultaneously. We can have our parliamentarians in parliament doing the work, and we can have the people outside protesting. The Guyanese people need to come out and protest. Every time there's a parliamentary sitting, come out and protest. Okay? The PPP is not being democratic in their ways of execution when it comes to dealing with our opposition and dealing with our country holistically. So we need to put a stop to this. And we just can't send the parliamentarians to parliament and there's nobody to watch their back. They need the people behind them because we are dealing with some monsters here. And when you're dealing with monsters, you need to always have backup. So I totally agree with both Mr. Barnwell and Chris on this. We need to attack them inside and outside from both directions. And, Chris, sometimes people feel that, there's not a need for protest. Listen, in this great country, the United States of America, the African Americans have went out and protest and give their lives for voting rights, among so many other things. Back in the Jim Crow era, they would have went through so much. So, that should empower us. That should empower Guyanese. There is something that we are fighting for. There is an end goal here. We're not fighting for nothing. Democracy is something you have to fight for. And we have to think of the future generations in Guyana. Because, Chris, based on what I have been seeing with the PPPC, man, they are trying to weed out the history, the true history of Guyana with its forest people, the indigenous people, and then with the Afro-Guyanese who was a part of, the whole Atlantic slave trade and everything else that would have come to Guyana, work as slaves, gain emancipation, and hand us something that we can work with, Chris. Our ancestors would have handed us something that we can work with. Now it's in our hands to basically execute and hand it to the next generation in good shape. But the PPPC is seeking to dismiss us and dismiss our history. And we're not going to stand for it. You know why? Guyana belongs to us, all of us. Not Irfan Ali, not Bar Jagdeo, not anyone in that installed regime. Over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you so much. And to those of you who are now joining us, good evening and welcome. As some of you already heard, our operator just put that right up there, just like that, straight in my face, almost scared the living daylight out of me. But here it is, Luncheon is dead. Luncheon is dead. Somebody said that he is, 73 or 74? No, that I'm not sure how accurate that is because I'm not kidding you guys. I have heard of Luncheon since I was a little boy, and that was donkey years ago. And my great-grandfather heard about Luncheon when he was a little boy. So I'm wondering how could Luncheon have been 73 or 74 years old. Anyways, Luncheon is gone. He's kicked the bucket. I notice Jack Dave is saying, true son of the soil lost. Jack Dave on the death of Luncheon. True son. I don't know what true son, but this is the same guy that when he ran to be the presidential candidate of the PPPC, This same true son, because of his ethnicity, they didn't want. They just used him for one particular purpose, and that purpose was to appear every single time they had the what is it? He was help me out here, Chris or Wayne. He was the what the
Cabinet secretary.
yeah.
Yeah.
And and this is what he did. Independent probe into Phantom. He named the Phantom group. He suggested that there were some
Yes.
Phantom force out there. You know.
Yes.
Anyways, what was his name? One of the other guy, old wig for the PPP, went a couple of weeks ago.
Ashton Chase.
Ashton Chase went a couple of weeks ago. Ashton Chase decided that, hey, he needs company. Luncheon might decide that, look, he needs company too, and might probably, I don't know. I don't want to say anything else, but let's just say good evening to Odinga Lumumba. We haven't seen him in a while. He might be hiding from luncheon, who knows? But all right, sorry about that, Chris. I got a bit carried away, Chris and Wayne. What else is happening in Guyana? The Madja inquiry, nothing at all. Talk to us about that, please.
Well, listen, again, PPP is of the opinion, and this is how they operate, that once there's a problem, all you need to do is throw money at it, and that resolves the issue. I was taken aback just a mere, I think, 48 hours after that tragedy in Madja. To hear the president speaking that the relative are asking for compensation within 48 hours. The ashes were still smothering with smoke and all of that, and he is speaking about compensation. And that is how the People's Progressive Party Civic believe that they can run a country, is that essentially, in their opinion, that once you turn Guyanese into mendicants, it is the way in which you can control them. I'll take you quickly to just Monday last, Region 3, Mahika Borbis region at the Regional Democratic Office. You saw hundreds of Guyanese lining up outside of the RDC office because there was this talk by Vice President Jagdeo that they're making available some $200,000 grant to people with small businesses and so forth. Hundreds of people turned up outside the office on Monday, only to then understand that what the PPP did a few days before that is distributed the monies to their supporters and key persons who play a pivotal role for them during the local government election. So it was just a sham. And I take you back now to the local government elections. And this is what I continue to credit the Guyanese people who stood firm and said to the PPP that the end of the PPP's disrespect to their intelligence must come to an end. Because the People's Progressive Party Civic at the last local government elections, for example, spent over 9 billion Guyana dollars in those elections. The PPP printed over 240,000 t-shirts. They had over 400,000 of the PPP flags paraded all throughout the entire country. And then when it came to the elections, the people listened to the message, they understood what was at stake, and the people came out and they voted against them. Because, as I mentioned before, that is how the PPP believe that they can run the country, by simply throwing monies at any issue and so forth. They like the situation of which Guyanese could be turned or made into mendicants, and literally once you hear Vice President Jagdeo is going here or a minister of the PPP is going here, people line up because you could like to get a $20,000 and a $25,000. That is the manner in which the PPP is currently running the country. But local government elections said to them clearly that the people are not prepared to have their intelligence continue to be disrespected by the PPP. And therefore, they're taking a step back. But it is the same PPP. This is the manner in which they operate. The Madja situation, it is no surprise. There will likely be no investigation into that. Because if they go into the investigation, you will see documentation which points to the fact that the government, it was brought to the government's attention that the dorms in which the children died was a fire hazard and the bars needed to be removed. And senior government officials, including the now disgraced Nigel Darmalal, former local government minister is one of those persons who would have been who would be held culpable of that, including regional officials of the regions as well. So any inquiry into that will lead to that outcome. And the PPP, noting that will be the outcome, they will ensure that it never happens. I said in Parliament during the budget presentation that the People's Progressive Party Civic only negotiates when they can win. Any situation, unless the PPP is certain that the outcome would be to their benefit or to their benefit, they don't participate. That is the PPP. So don't expect any inquiry into the Madia incident. It is a closed case, and that is why the PPP set out to bribe the families, to give them what you would consider hush money. They had to sign a piece of documentation which doesn't allow them in future to take legal action against the People's Progressive Party civic government. That is the PPP. Heartless. They don't care about those children. As far as they're concerned, all they see is a bunch of Amerindian children who got burned up, and that's the end of it. Look, for example, with the photograph that we are seeing on screen. These are the kids who were injured in the fire. They were in hospital. The PPP, wanting a good show, brought those children out of the hospital, paraded them at the Umanayana, take photographs with them, with ministers hugging up the children that are crying and all kind of thing, because for the PPP, it was all about a show, to show that the president is sympathizing, that ministers are sympathizing, and so forth. We got reports emanating from the National Communications Network and DPI that the camera persons were given specific instructions that they must look for when the children are weeping, or if any government official is consoling them, that they must ensure that they take those photographs. That is what that was about. That is the PPP. Heartless, the least concerned about anything in this society, in the country.
Heartless indeed. Wade?
Well, Mark, you know my opinion on this whole Madia tragedy. Listen. I'm starting to think that this, although it's deemed an accident, unless there's a real external investigation, not by the Guyana Police Force, not by anyone in Guyana. We have external agencies come in and put together that whole crime scene and do an investigation. At that point, you can convince me that it's an accident if that is the findings. But until so, Mark, I am going to go with my deep opinion that these young ladies were murdered and that little boy. That place was purposely put on fire, and if we would have went ahead and investigated properly the bodies of those young women, we would have found things that I don't want to talk about on the show here. But I know that those young ladies, Mark, had to be interfered with based, Mark, on what happens to our young indigenous women in those areas like Madia. And probably they were going to go out and they was going to make information public, and that was the cause. It cost them their lives, because it's hard to understand how they would have just been locked in there like that. And we're not getting proper explanations, Mark. The explanations is not concrete. It's not tying out correctly. When I do my analysis of it, it's just not tying out, Mark. And it's sad.
It doesn't at all. Lots of us, and your analysis is accurate. Can't disagree with that at all. Lots and lots of suspicions, even in the international arena. Lots of suspicions about that death. Mr. Jones, I believe that looking at some of the questions out there in the audience from some of our members there watching, they're concerned about the allegations that we're hearing that the former disgraced Guyana High Commissioner to India, Charam Das, he's still on the payroll. And another disgraced minister, Dharamla, is said to be on the payroll as well. Respond to those allegations and also the fact that it's been weeks and Dharamlal has not yet been replaced. What's happening?
So again, Mark, Wayne, the viewers, it is the state of play that we have in what's supposed to be a democratic society that is called Guyana. The People's Progressive Party civic plays this role with the international community, the ABCE countries, that in Guyana there is democracy. They spread across the world about this one Guyana. They show you pictures of little girls and boys in colorful skirts and pants, holding hands, different ethnicity, and everybody is kumbaya, my lord. Everybody live in peace and harmony. There is no racial discrimination in the country. The country is governed by an administration that believes in democracy and all of that. What you pointed out is facts that indeed Charandas Prasad is still on the payroll of the People's Progressive Party civic government. Nigel Dharmalal is still on the payroll of the People's Progressive Party civic government, inclusive of two former parliamentary secretaries, of which I brought a court matter, and acting Chief Justice Roxanne George ruled that their appointment as parliamentary secretary was illegal, and as such they had to demit office. I can show you parliamentary records which show that the two still receive their salaries. The PPP took that matter, Anil Nandalal took that matter to the appeal court just last week, and the appeal court also upheld the ruling from Madam Roxanne George, and they continue to be on the payroll. Now deceased, condolences to his immediate family and friends. Roger Luncheon, at 70 something plus years of age, is a presidential advisor, is on the payroll.
I guess he was getting over $500,000 a month on the payroll, not doing anything, just money for the boys.
That's right, and bedridden. And this is the PPP. When we speak about PPP, about friends, family, and favorite, this is what we talk about. Is that the PPP is of the opinion that the national purse belongs to them. This money comes out of Freedom House, and therefore it has to go to party comrade and a party man. But when it comes to the public servants, the police and soldiers, the nurses, the teachers, and all of that, in terms of increasing their wages and salaries, as the PPP promised them during their election campaign, that they will give them 50% salary increase. To date, none of the public servants have seen that. They had this whole big show in which they had the senior members of the Guyana Police Force and the Guyana Defense Force ordered junior ranks to gather in a room in which they had the National Communication Network and DPI cameras there, in which Irfan Ali was making a pronouncement about a salary increase. And they received the instruction that when the president makes the announcement, they must jump up in loud cheers and all of that. And the photograph, that is the PPP. And this is exactly what you will see in countries like North Korea. You know, this is what you would see in North Korea. This is what you might like to see in places like Russia and so forth. That is what is Guyana's now. That is Guyana. There's no longer democracy. Guyana currently is a dictatorship. And they, like many other dictators, like North Korea, they parade this sham and show you these videos and photographs that you believe that these countries are doing well. Look at the little children smiling and dancing one Guyana and so forth. Behind all of that facade is the reality. That right now Guyana is we're just waiting perhaps the international report. Guyana is one of the most corrupt countries in the Western Hemisphere. We've already seen within 3 weeks of the PPP return to office that the largest drug bust emanating from Guyana was found in this country. Can't remember the name. Just a mere 3 weeks after. What does that say to you? It says to you that people who are involved in the narcotics trade find comfort in a People's Progressive Party civic government. And every so often you see the headlines about drugs intercepted in foreign territories emanating from Guyana because they find comfort in the People's Progressive Party civic. The PPP knows who these people are. The PPP knows where they are because they are connected to the People's Progressive Party civic, and they shadow and shield and protect them. That's why we talk about what is currently happening in Guyana with the Guyana Police Force. It is not an independent force. It is a force that is governed or run by the People's Progressive Party civic out of Freedom House. If, for example, Wayne Caesars in Guyana, and Wayne mentioned some minister name on the program a few weeks ago, and that minister wants to get it, Wayne, that minister will call the police and instruct them to go and arrest Wayne. When the police come and arrest Wayne, and Wayne asks, why am I being arrested? The police can't tell you because there's no arrest, but they were instructed. That is what is currently happening in Guyana. Guyana has essentially returned to the Guyana of the 23 years under Barra Jagdio's administration. When you had the phantom death squad in operation, you had a sitting minister who was named by an alleged phantom member, George Bacchus. And the man said that, like, for example, the night when he went home, and just as he was getting home, he saw this car spinning away and he heard gunshots at his home. When he went to his home, he saw his brother dead. And he saw that when the vehicle was spilling away, the person in the vehicle looked and shouted and said, look, it's the wrong one, it's the wrong one. George Bacchus, an alleged phantom death squad member, said he picked up the phone and called the PPP sitting Minister of Home Affairs, Ronald Gadraj, and said to him, them by just kill my brother. All of this is on record. The BBC was in Guyana. The BBC did a complete documentary of what was transpiring. They spoke with George Bacchus. They met with him. He said to them who, what, where, when, why, all connected to the People's Progressive Party civic. And immediately after they got into office, within a mere weeks and months, apart from the interception of drugs in foreign territories, you had the shooting to death of paper sharks right on Main Street outside of Palm Court, a few buildings away from the president's residence and the prime minister's residence and all of that. The same playbook, the same PPP, they have not changed. They have not changed. I said to people that my years in the political happenings in Guyana span that September of this year will be 26 years. So many times when I speak about the PPP, that when I speak about Barra Jagdio, it is not coming from a place of what I heard someone said. It is coming from a place of which I experienced it. And I know what transpired. You had situation in which, you remember the young man where the joint services burnt his genitals by throwing mentholated spirit and lighting him a fire. All of that transpired in Guyana. It is the same PPP back again with this whole facade about one Guyana. And unfortunately, the most unfortunate thing is happening is that a few of our Guyanese people are getting swayed with this. A leopard never changes its spot, and the People's Progressive Party civic has not changed their ways. They remain the same political party of then, and it's the same political party now. And even more so, I say to people that there is a current big rift in the PPP. They are the Jagdioites and they are the Irfanites. You have the Jagdioite who has a particular direction that he wants to go in, of which Nigel Darmalal happens to be one of those. And you have the Irfanites who are actually trying to go in another direction. And there is a big rift between them right now. And that is why you had the whole long play with Nigel Darmalal, whether he has resigned or he has not resigned, because the Jagdionites' position is that he should be remaining in office, and the Irfanites is that he has to go. So you have that and all in the PPP. There's a big rift. During the local government election, when I said to people, the plot, the plan, the objective by the PPP is to use the municipalities in which they will target, particularly South Georgetown or Georgetown, New Amsterdam, and Linden. And they're going to go after those people who have outstanding rates and taxes, and they will foreclose on your properties, because the Jagdio would have met in Trinidad and Florida. He would have met with business or financiers who have intentions to build many of those apartment buildings that you see sprawling off in New York and Florida and so forth. And they have pointed to Jaglio places like Lane Avenue, particularly Lane Avenue, East and West Rumbelt, this back road and front road area, because they wanted to buy out those entire area to build those apartment buildings and those condos and so forth. I said to them then, is that this is the same PPP? You have to listen and don't be swayed by Jaglio. Jaglio came out attacking me, saying it's a lie, it is not so. And then Jaglio himself, after the local government election, said to the set people in South Georgetown, of which we were saying during the local government elections campaign, that your property value has tripled. But during the time, Jaglio wasn't saying that. But after the election, Jaglio himself confessed that people in South Georgetown property value has tripled. And he's alleging that he said to someone that they mustn't sell whole and all kind of thing. He wasn't saying that before the elections, because the objective, as I mentioned before, was to use the rates and taxes through the municipalities, foreclose on their properties, and those same financiers that Jaglio would have met, those coming out of Trinidad and those coming out of Florida, would have used their monies to purchase many of those properties to erect their apartments and their condo buildings. Tomorrow, for example, in the parliament, there is the real estate and brokers bill that is coming to the parliament. All of these were set in motion. Is that the average Guyanese now, you can't just be renting a downstairs or upstairs or two house or two little bedroom and so forth. You have to now be registered. You have to be a realtor. You have to be a broker. And you know the reality is that a lot of Guyanese just got a little space and they're making a little side money because the monies that they're getting as a public servant can't cover the bills. So now the PPP want to put the squeeze on them. And that is this bill that is coming tomorrow in the parliament. Just for example, it is the same PPP. We are in a dictatorship. It is no longer that Guyana is slipping towards that. We are there. And this facade of this one Guyana and people holding hand and swinging and singing Kumbaya and Sam that the PPP wants to project, that is exactly the play sheet or playbook that you see in places like North Korea. Big hullabaloo, but behind it, the people are oppressed, the people are suppressed, the wages and salaries are nothing to talk about. That is what we have in this country.
Absolutely nothing to talk about. 10 minutes after 10 o'clock. Wayne, here's your final question for the Honorable Chief Whip. And of course, your closing remarks, Wayne, the Chief Whip's closing remarks.
You know, Mark and Chris, I have to thank you. You that was well said, well put together. It was a whole lot of information right there. And I am so happy that this information is coming from the mouth of a parliamentarian, because it paints the perfect picture for the Guyanese people to see and listen. I'm looking into this camera and I'm saying to the people, what Chris would have just depicted, there is no way any right-thinking human being is going to want that for themselves and for their families. You are talking about a government that is totally operating in the underworld. I could never have recalled, outside of those 23 years of the PPPC being in government and oppressing the people, that Guyana would have ever experienced what they've experienced over the past 3 years and the 23 years under this government. Let's just take a little sneak peek into when the coalition was in power as opposed to this wicked regime. You had discipline. You know, in the police force, the officers were excellent. Mr. Granger gave them a nice, decent pay raise. and he held them responsible for those vehicles that they were using and everything. That's what you call accountability. Our government was working without the oil revenue, but we were still executing from an economic perspective. Yes, there were some tough times. And whenever an economy is trying to correct itself, it could even be in the US, it could be in London, it could be in Dubai, any country. When an economy is correcting itself, there is going to be some challenges for the citizen. Listen, the coalition inherit a Guyana that had a blown up economy that was blown up by drugs and racketeering. Mr. Granger and his cabinet came in there and make that a cabinet and make Guyana an economy of some decency. A real economy. That's what we had. And I say this to the Guyanese people to say this. We have to vote for change. And when we vote for change, we have to be patient. We have to exercise some measure of patience. And we cannot forget what it is that we are facing now. Look at what the government is doing to our people. Just take a look at what the government is doing to our people. The PPPC is sharing out money. And mind you, the way these monies are being distributed is illegal in nature. No one should be walking around with cash money and distributing it. Okay, people should have their identifications and they should be going to a banking institution to uplift that money. And if you're going to give out money, you give out money to all Guyanese, because the revenue that's coming in from the oil belongs to all of Guyana, not just who you choose, to give out money to. And I am 100% in agreement with the Honorable Chief Whip, Mr. Christopher Jones, that Guyana is not teetering towards a dictatorship anymore. This is 100% a dictatorship. Like I would have said, we have the framework in place for a democracy. And I say it again, the PPPC is not the dancing partner to execute democracy across Guyana. In order for democracy to be executed across Guyana, you would need to have in place a caring government, a government who puts its people first. And that government is the APNU. It's our opposition that is sitting there right now. And I'm going to be frankly honest, I would have had a program, I think last Saturday, for emancipation with the Honorable David Arthur Granger. And before we got on the program, I let him know that, I had a right to my opinion. And I let him know that I was in the presence of the correct president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, because there's no way that Order 60 can sit a government, and I stand by that. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you so much. 15 minutes after 10 o'clock, the Honorable Chief Whip, our guest for this evening. Hey, guess what? We have so many other questions we want to ask. The people are enjoying the information that you're giving us, and my co-host Wayne Caesar as well. But all good things must come to an end. We need to pull the curtains down. But before we go, lots of things. People need Guyana back. They need to take Guyana back out of the hands of these criminals, these PPP criminals. It must be done. They want to see a clean voters list. They want to see so many different things. In your closing remarks, in the event that we didn't ask any particular question that you find it to be important, that you want our listeners to hear, this is your opportunity, sir.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me start off by saying, Mark, I want to place on public record and commend people like you, Wayne Caesar, Rickford Burke, Norman Brown, and so forth, and those in general in the diaspora for the work that you have been doing. I know at times you may feel that you are what we would refer to as spitting in the wind, but I want to assure you, all of you, that you are making great impact in the day-to-day operation of Guyana. The PPP don't like to be exposed. And essentially, on all of those programs that I mentioned with those individuals, you have been doing exactly that. And that itself lends to the work that we are doing in Parliament, and it lends to the work that we're doing on the ground. Essentially, we are approximately 30 months away from a general and regional elections in Guyana. And essentially, campaign starts immediately after an elections. And we are starting that. We are in that process. But of course, as you get closer, those work have to be intensified. We say to those Guyanese in the diaspora, you have your relatives and friends back home. And essentially, the people who go out to vote on elections day are your relatives and friends. And just by speaking to them to ensure that you keep them in line, because particularly a lot of people, a lot of young people may not have experienced the years of the People's Progressive Party civic during their Phantom Death Squad or during the Barrett Jagdeo administration. And it is the same Jagdeo who is now going to them with the flourish shirt and presenting himself like the best thing next to sliced bread. And that is essentially how the devil works. He presents to you the best and rosiest picture that you ever see. And it's the elders who have the scriptures who could share with them those scriptures and remind them of those scriptures, which is essentially what transpired in Guyana. We have a lot of work to do. The opposition in Parliament cannot do it alone, and it is dependent as well on you good folks in the diaspora to lend support. The international community has a role to play. And I know Mark, Rickford, Norman, and so forth have been reaching out to very many congressmen and mayors and so forth and sharing with them what is happening in Guyana. I know from Rickford Burke's end, and you yourself, Mark Benchcap, with those persons in the Congress in the United States, they are being made aware in terms of what is happening in Guyana, and they're being abreast as you go forward. That is what is needed, because essentially one of the most feared political figure in the United States to the People's Progressive Party civic is Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. They don't like to mention the name. They don't like anything to do with him because, I mean, he hasn't made any main pronouncement on Guyana or anything, but they know that he's listening, and that is the biggest problem. And what they seek to do with many congressmen, I wouldn't call their names, but we know a few of them, is seek to quiet them down by making one or two nice handy handouts to them and donation and that sort of thing. When the time comes, we will speak loudly because, again, here in the United States, it is the Guyanese people who vote for those same congressmen as well. And they will have to be made aware in terms of who these individuals are. I'd like to thank you very much again, Mark, for affording me the opportunity. I know we had a very short time, so I'm making myself available to you and Wayne in future programs so that we could have a more lengthy discourse. But a lot has to be said. We haven't even spoken about the elephant in the room, which the PPP don't like you to talk about at all, and that is the blatant racial discrimination in Guyana, in which Afro-Guyanese are always being given the raw end of the stick. And we can talk about that at length. That is still
if I'm reading Wayne's face correctly, Wayne is saying, and since you have suggested, Honorable Chief Whip, that 1 hour, 20 minutes is short, take some time to talk about the elephant in the room, racial discrimination, particularly against our African brothers and sisters.
So I take you back to coming into the last elections, in which the People's Progressive Party civic would have made announcements that, listen, should they get back in power, many of those persons who receive land through the Guyana Lands and Survey, they will investigate them, and where these persons are found that they were essentially given the land without going through the legal procedures and so forth, they will take those lands away. Immediately when the PPP got into office, the very individuals that they went after happens to be Guyanese of African descent. Case in point, Vons Waste Management, you have Mr. Bradford from Carcare, and so forth, just to name a few. They went after myself, and it for literally the entire list. If the PPP wants to present that to the public, you will see it is Guyanese of African descent. I take you to the village of Kingley, West Coast Berbice, Region 5, in which Anil Nandala, the sitting attorney general, left the comfort of his home in Georgetown, traveled all the way to Kingley in West Coast Berbice to say to the PPP supporters that they must occupy a particular land and they must behave as if the land is theirs. The land he was instructing them to take as if it is theirs happens to be the ancestral lands of Mr. Lincoln Lewis. Just for example, when you go into the public service, the same PPP said to public servants that once you elect us, we will give you 50% increase in wages and salaries. It is no secret that some 90% of the public servants in Guyana happens to be Guyanese of African descent. And to date, they can't receive a living wage. I take you to flood relief. I take you to, cost of living incentive, and all of these packages that the people, COVID relief that the PPP distributed during the period of time. You see the PPP went into villages and they give people these slips. And when it's time to distribute the monies, you have a lot of Guyanese of African descent, in particularly African villages and communities that are dominated by Afro-Guyanese. They are still left holding the very same pink slip. And whereas when you go to the communities in which the PPP has their supporters, all of the communities, all of the households receive the COVID cash grant. And in some cases, people receive double the amount. You had massive corruption with the farmers, the flood relief in particular regions such as Region 2 and Region 6, in which the PPP gave their cronies those monies to distribute. You had recordings made public in which some of the PPP activists in particular areas had a scam in which they give individuals the cash grant, and which the persons had to give them back some $4,000 each for every single one. All of that was made public. To date, not one single individual has been prosecuted for that. And of course, it comes back to Afro-Guyanese accessing land. And I'm not talking about land for build a house. That is a right. It's not a given, it's a right. Every single Guyanese, irrespective of their race, irrespective of their political persuasion, have a right to access a land to build a house. But I'm talking about land 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 acres of land. If the PPP wants to be true and transparent, ask them to provide you with a list of persons who were given lands from 50 to 100 to 500 acres. And then you go through that list and see who are the Guyanese of African descent that were able to access land over 200 acres and so forth. It just don't happen because the PPP is of the opinion that they have no right to that amount of land. What would they do with land? They don't need it. So if it's a house lot, you might be lucky to get that. And then they go parade you on the National Communications Network and DPI that, look, Afro-Guyanese receiving house lot. But when it comes to economic empowerment, ain't talking about just a house lot, economic empowerment. Give me 100 acres of land. Give me 200 acres of land. Afford me the opportunity to enter into agriculture and farming and so forth. And let me produce. But that is what the PPP don't allow Guyanese of African descent to reach that level. All of that is blatant across Guyana. That is just part of the elephant in the room. It is what I spoke about here is equivalent to throwing a tic-tac in a well. It is just the tip of the iceberg, what is happening in Guyana. It is the reality. Last year, the government had what is going to happen at this month and the Housing Expo. And they boast about some 360 or 380 booths that are set up, of which Guyanese of all walks of life have an opportunity to ply their trade and show what business they're involved in and so forth. Mark, when I walked through the housing, the exhibition that they had, the Afro-Guyanese happened to be the ones who were selling the barbecue, the fish fry, and the beers around the entire canteen stretch where people are selling food. That is where the Afro-Guyanese are. And when you go around the other areas, when you find in the contractor, the one who has the bulldozers and the excavators or whatnot, that is the reality. That is what was observed at the last very same housing expo that is going to happen this month in. So they boast about Guyanese of all walks of life, but when you go and walk, you see where some of the Guyanese are. They are the food vendors. Nothing is wrong with that because you make good income from selling food. But I'm telling you, in terms of the disproportion, in terms of what some Guyanese have access to and some Guyanese have access to. It is a stark contrast between the two. And that is what we're talking about because the economic empowerment of Guyanese of African descent is not on the People's Progressive Party Civic's top agenda. That is not important to them. If they can parade the Guyanese of African descent as, oh, look, you get a house lot, and obviously people are happy and they will express words of pleasantry because they receive a house lot. But that is the crux of the PPP. That is where the cameras will come and record you, and you'll find yourself on NCN News and DPA. In fact, today, which happens to be the third year of your finale's installation, there are some snippets that the National Communication Network has released out there. If they have 50 short videos, I kid you not, 30 happens to be Guyanese of African descent, 15 happens to be Guyanese of Amerindian descent, and then 5 happens to be Guyanese of East Indian descent. What does that say to you? It is a show. It is all a show by the PPP to project an image of a country of which people are all enjoying the fruits of the country, which it is not so. It is not so. Part of the elephant in the room.
Part of the elephant in the room. Quite a mouthful, Wayne. Part of the elephant.
Yeah. Listen, I'm 100% with Mr. Jones on that. And listen, Chris went through the whole thing. He didn't even get to the fact of Moko, where, our Afro-Guyanese brothers and sisters were just totally bulldozed. And you know something, Mark? Right. You know what was interesting, man? Their livestock was buried alive, Mark. That would never happen to anyone else. I am telling you this.
It wouldn't even happen apart from livestock. It wouldn't even happen to Polori, Polori lady.
But just an update with the same Moko. The very people. Okay, so the PPP started their propaganda on those people in Moko, in Caneview, and they said that whether it was 11 families, they are stopping progress. They're denying the rest of Guyana progress, which is this road. As we speak here today, the road hasn't passed where those people live, and this is how many months after. The road has
changed their minds. They changed their minds. Those criminals in the PPP.
Yeah. So all of the big things that the Black in Progress, the people have been, the homes have been demolished, the livelihood has been demolished, and the road didn't pass yet, the road didn't open yet, nothing happened. They just did the same way.
And Mark, Mark, to add to that, it just shows you that, the Guyanese people are dealing with a set of dunces. Because I know many would have traveled to the United States. And Chris, highways have turns. Don't highways have turns? They do. You don't have to go right through the people. You can be nice, turn the highway, take it around the area, and then go back on your merry way. But listen, I agree with Chris 100% on this. Look, Hillfoot also, same thing. It is consistent. Yeah. Look at the disparity when it comes to distribution of wealth across Guyana. Look at who own the large, wealthy businesses in Guyana. Sometimes people don't want you to point out these things. But that's right. How can you not? How can you not? Right. Over to you, Mark.
And we'll leave with that. Thank you so much, Wayne. How can we not? Honorable Chief Justice.
Thank you.
Christopher Jones.
Accept. Chief Justice, Mark. Chief Justice. Chief
Accept.
Or did I say Chief Justice?
Yes, sir. Accept. I accept.
It comes with the age. Please, guys, forgive me. Did I say it means that maybe we'll hear something about the Chief Justice tomorrow that she probably will be elevated. I don't know, or maybe she'll just walk off the job. So the Honorable Chief Justice tonight, Mr. Chris Jones, and the Honorable Chief Whip, Mr. Wayne Caesar.
Thank you. I guess I've unseated Chris. Chris, you can move up and I'll take your place, sir.
And our Parliament out there. Good evening to all our members of
Yes.
Parliament, Tony Hack, Simone Blackman, Ian Williams, Dennis Atwell, Arlene, all of our members of Parliament. Check this out when you go to Parliament tomorrow. Ask the Speaker of the National Assembly if he holds citizenship in another country, maybe America and Canada, and he sits there as the Speaker of the National Assembly. Ask him that question, whether he's a citizen of the U.S. or Canada, and he sits there as the Speaker of the National Assembly in another country. I don't know.
Will do.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, I would hope that he was watching tonight to hear my message to him that he's the worst speaker that I would have ever seen.
Yeah.
Despicable. I hope he's watching.
And to all of you, let's hope that he's watching. He's not a Speaker of the National Assembly. As Alita Jones said, he's Speaker. Yes, Speaker. He's just a flat-foot hustler. That's what he is. Chris, nice haircut, man. Nice haircut.
Thank you.
Yep. Good to see you again. Thank you.
Same here.
And Wayne, thank you so much. I know I'll probably be traveling tomorrow. Who knows if I'm back late? Well, then Wayne already has a good guest lineup. You will see that guest when that person is on tomorrow evening. But again, thank you so much, Chief Whip. Chief Whip.
Most welcome, Mark.
Thank you so much.
All right, Chris. Take care.
Thank you so much too, Mr. Caesar. Appreciate it.
Yes.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah. And to all of you, our beautiful people watching and listening. And don't forget, when Ashton Chase went, we did say right here that carrying somebody with him. We weren't making mockery of anything, but he carried somebody with him. And now Luncheon has passed away. Luncheon is dead. Dead. Many of you would remember those years. Oh, my gosh. One particular time in 2002, it was July 3rd, 2002, Roger Luncheon, the other Prasad, Robert Prasad, sorry guys, stood right there at that window at the office of the president and watched those presidential guards shot and killed several unarmed protesters. Death is a must. It's not something that I'm going to sit and smile and laugh about when even those who have helped to destroy Guyana for 20-something years and plus this 3 years. Death is a must. Let them go. The question is, who will he carry with him? Ashton Chase needed company, and Ashton Chase chased after Luncheon. And now who will Luncheon invite to lunch? How's Odinga doing, guys? When was the last time you heard or saw Odinga Lumumba? Anyways, Jack Dew and these guys, you never know, right? You just never know. My name is Mark Penchap, though. I'll see you guys hopefully back tomorrow. Same place, same time. That corrupt, racist PPP regime. I know there are some things that are still on the agenda. Sue, Jack Dale, and then these folks who are being persecuted by the PPP. We still have this Dion Bascom revelation about the paper shards investigations. The suspects are still around, pomposetting themselves. And then we still have the question about when will the acting commissioner of police go. We still have the question about who are those persons who are in the wanted list by U.S. law enforcement agencies. We still have this here. Lots and lots of things we still have. There's a individual, we haven't heard anything about that. We heard about the Mahdia situation, still no commission of inquiry. This little girl, they have charged with those 20 deaths. She's still languishing in there. The police probably still doing their investigations. And we have over a GCOM, nothing, massive corruption there. And then the country is just basically destroyed by these vagabonds, this criminal. And then you have these sad story looking kind of individuals. Then you have this police commander still on the job. Then you have this DPP woman still on the job. And then you have some people still sleeping and asking to let the system work. Then you have this guy over 1 week in China, ignore the African celebrations of Emancipation Day in Guyana. Then you have Exxon in Guyana doing business with individuals who are said to be criminals in the eyes of U.S. law enforcement agency. And then you have this Mohammed guy just posing with his gun. And then you have Reuters report. Oh my gosh. You guys want on and on and on right here. And not to forget the fires, right? 13 passenger boats destroyed. Don't be surprised if they are going to be meeting with Irfan or Jack Deal and they're going to promise them to buy back all of the boats, right? Anyways, all these things happening, but don't be saddened about things. Tomorrow when you're hungry and if you're in Brooklyn and Church Avenue, just rush down over to Linda and Linda's restaurant. Grab yourself something. Get some white pudding, black pudding, whatever you're into. Just get something and enjoy yourself. Tell Linda and the crew that you heard it right here on 107.1 FM. And this weekend, guess what, guys? Saturday, we'll be in Brooklyn broadcasting live from several locations. And I'll probably stop by here and get a haircut and look nice and fresh for you guys. Nice and fresh indeed. And for those of you who are in Guyana, because, you know, I don't have a passage to go to Guyana. I would go to Guyana to confront those criminals. Don't be fooled. But once you're in Guyana, go out there and support Andrew's Supermarket. Sorry about that. Go out there, something like lunch and there for a second. Oh, that's Mines, right? All right. And for those of you having a little difficulties with immigration matters, don't forget, one phone call to me might probably, and in most instances, clear the way for you. So give me a call later, maybe tomorrow, and you never know what can happen. Don't forget our attorney too, right? Shalon Washington is always here for you guys. Shalon is due back on the show. We need to see her, right, Wayne? Let's see Miss Washington hopefully sometime soon. But for now, guess what? God bless you, and God bless our beautiful country. See you guys later, hopefully tomorrow night, right here on 107.1 FM. Tata.
Hello, this is attorney Shalon Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
With another one, straight up, blackness. Messiah. Aye. Who tell the truth? Mark Ben Scott, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Ben Scott, registration is the truth. Mark Ben Scott, straight up from the root. Mark Ben Scott, who tell the truth? Mark Ben Scott, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Ben Scott, registration is the fruit. Mark Ben Scott, straight up from the root. Mark Ben Scott, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money. Straight up, him attack, educating everybody. Big up my friends and big up my family. Turn on the radio, catch the vibes, it's integrity. Straight up, Ben Scott stands for unity. One people, one nation, one destiny. Free up the truth in the air, even the blind can see. The deaf can need it, don't contact the cripple walk. Who tell the truth? Mark Ben Scott, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Ben Scott, registration is the truth. Mark Ben Scott, straight up from the root.